Hey, I hope you're staying cool. It is so hot out here, but I had to take the time to come up and do the second part of my two-part supermodel text book talk, where I talk about excerpts from novels that I think would be fun to share with students and teach some writing skills and some little grammar usage skills while introducing them to a variety of authors. So here's a good one for your writer's notebooks or journals or whatever you use. I always prefer the spiral notebooks, cheap and easy. So in the last episode, I talked about tone in The Marrow Thieves. This text right here, used an excerpt from that, and we discussed that. And I mentioned that I wanted to do a compare and contrast on how the author uses tone, or the author's use of tone in this versus the author's use of tone in this text. McCarthy's The Road. I do want to say I'm being responsible in quarantining. I didn't actually go to Starbucks. I haven't been to Starbucks in, months. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been to a Starbucks. I used to get work done at Starbucks, but I've been responsible. I've been quarantining. This is just iced coffee I made at home, and now it's just watery, but it's not as good as Starbucks. I miss it, but that's okay, staying safe, and I hope you're staying safe as well. So I hope that we don't end up like the setting of The Road, this desolate, dystopian, post-apocalyptic world, although sometimes it feels like that, which is also the setting of Marrow Thieves, this dystopian world, right? But it's a good text to teach, and hopefully won't hit too close to home to your students. I think you can probably check it out digitally, very easy, on any of the library services digital apps. And so if you're teaching from a distance, if you're doing distance learning, that is, I think it's definitely worth checking out. My library uses the app called Libby. I know Overdrive is probably still a popular app, but now is definitely a perfect time to talk to students about getting a library card if they don't already have one, and maybe signing up for the library's digital app so they can access the texts. Hoopla is another one that our library uses, and that one you don't even have to wait for like text to become available. They have, I've never had to wait anyway. They have a really big catalog, but you might find a book like this where you might want them to all read and look at together if you're doing distance learning. I mean, you definitely don't want to, like, I don't know, post it where they can see it on like Flipgrid or anything. That, copyright stuff. This is a really short one. So this is actually one that I used to love to start out the year with because it is so short and it's very simple. But because of the simplicity and specifically punctuation use, I think that is why it unravels this really great discussion about author's tone, and we talk about tone words, and it's like one of my first, I call it like a boot camp skill. Like that first week of school, I teach boot camp skills, and one of them is evaluating tone, and it'll be like one of the first steps that we regularly do with everything we read as a class, as we talk about the tone. And it's I like it because it's very good to make students justify their reasoning, and when you give them your tone vocab list, they can have very different answers, and really strengthening their way of logically coming up with the reasoning to back up their statements that they're making. And this one's just a good one to start out with because it is just so short. When I, of course, going to go do the first step, either photocopied or whatever you're doing to mark it up, the first step with students is to have them number the lines. Usually we number paragraphs, but this is so short, I have them number the lines in it, and there are 11 lines. And so that way when we're talking about as a class saying, oh, I think the tone is silly, and if you look at line 9, and you see how that works for discussion, then everyone can go look at line 9 together, and it just makes it a little bit easier to follow the discussion when we're arguing what the best, most accurate tone description is of this passage, or whatever passage. But it's 11 lines long. So it's going to be not intimidating to your struggling readers or those who are resistant to learning, they'll do more writing and talking. But the tricky part is you're going to trick them into wanting to reread. And they're not going to mind rereading this because it is so short. That's why it's just a brilliant passage to use at the beginning of the year. And then of course you ramp it up and you give them harder passages that are longer, and that increases their reading stamina as the year goes on. But this is a good one after they've had like that intense summer break. You can see mine's already a little bit marked up here. I was also doing like a subject verb, parts of speech recognition on it too, but I'm not going to talk about that one right now. So I would assign this. This starts on, I have the paperback edition of The Road, and this excerpt starts at the bottom of page 96 and rolls over to page 97. Of course, you're going to just tell students, I just want you to read starting from "he was half asleep" all the way to the end of "we need to hurry." Just read that part to yourself. Go. Like no other goals, just to read it. Just no other objectives right now, just read it. Silently to themselves. And now, I want you to go through and read it a second time, and this is what I like to do at the beginning of the year, I want you to do an I notice, I wonder sticky note. Just from what you observe and from what your second reading, what do you wonder and what do you notice about the passage? Let's read it real quickly, okay? He was half asleep when he heard the crashing in the woods. Then another. He sat up. The fire was down to scattered flames among the embers. He listened, the long dry crack of shearing limbs. Then another crash. He reached and shook the boy. "Wake up," he said. "We have to go." He rubbed the sleep from his eyes with the backs of his hands. "What is it?" he said. "What is it, Papa?" "Come on, we have to move." "What is it?" "It's the trees. They're falling down." The boy sat up and looked about wildly. "It's all right," the man said. "Come on, we need to hurry." That's all you give them. Like just that excerpt. Like I'd love to just pull this out since you don't have any of the context of the other pages where students could read before, what happens ahead. Just give them this standalone passage and then make them guess what happened before, what happened after. They can do a little creative writing activity based on that. But to our main point, what do you notice and what do you wonder? And what typically happens, of course, they wonder what they're running from. They're wondering where like other people are. It's a father-son here, you can infer. But where's the mom? And so they make up their own questions, which is always good for them to practice making their own questions. But of course they notice, and you can't notice from the video unless you look at it closely, the lack of diverse punctuation. It is only periods and question marks. And there's obviously something happening here that's very dangerous, but not a single exclamation point. And there's a dialogue going on here. There's no quotation marks whatsoever. And so we talk about why would the author do that? And so that's like the essential question we go out with is, how does the author's punctuation choice affect the way it's read? What were the author's intentions? And of course, was it effective or not? And going back to our first book, who did it better? When we think about the tone, they have very similar tones between the two passages. What were the things they did that were similar? What were the things they did that were different? And who did it better? Who did a better job at really invoking a serious tone or an urgent tone? Whatever tone they think that both passages have in common, which is a totally other activity where we just look at both of them side by side and say, okay, think of one tone word from your vocab list that you would use to describe the tones of these two passages that they share, a shared tone, if you will. And it's just it's a fun activity. I guess I did it backwards because I was just so excited to talk about this one. I should have talked about this one first because it's usually what I use at the beginning of the year. But you can do it both, either way, wherever you are. Have them discuss both and just decide, okay, this is the tone they have in common. Who did it better? And it's a toss-up. I'm not going to give you the answer because there's no right answer. It's really personal preference, right? So that is the passage. I hope you like it. That's it. That's the passage. On with the rest of the lesson. So until next time, I hope that you are staying safe And I hope that you take care of yourself, you take care of your students, and you take care of each other. All right.